You are going to make a mistake in English. That is a fact.
But the question is, how are you going to recover?
Or what are you going to do when that happens?
So many of our students, when they make a mistake, they don't really know what to do, so they end up apologizing. Like a lot. They say a lot of, I'm sorry, or, oh, I'm sorry, my English is so bad. My English is so bad.
My English is so terrible. And honestly, as an English teacher, it drives me crazy just a little bit. They're scared, right? They don't want to be seen as not fluent. They don't want to be seen as they don't know anything.
Or just burdensome. That was my problem in the languages that I've studied before, is like I felt bad. I felt like I was wasting their time a little bit. But I also learned that in certain cultures, you should apologize a lot. American culture is not one of them.
Today we're going to talk about 5 better ways to navigate when you make a mistake, other than just saying, I'm sorry.
So the first one is to clarify or ask a question related to the topic so that you can kind of figure out what exactly they were saying. So it gives you a minute to recover while they're talking.
Yeah, this works even when you make the mistake. So not just necessarily a listening mistake, but even when you say something wrong and you're like, oh, that was wrong, or the other person's looking at you like, I don't know what you're talking about, you can then quickly follow up with a related question.
So one of the questions you can ask is, what does that mean? Or how does that work?
What you're doing is you're pushing the conversation back to them, which gives you as the other speaker a little bit more time to figure out what you said was wrong and how you can come back from that question with a more fluent response.
A little bit of break to catch a few more keywords that you can use in your response.
So let's say, for example, if you're talking about your summer plans and you make a mistake or you hear them wrongly, instead of just saying, I'm sorry, or freezing up, what you can do is you could ask maybe about the weather. How is the weather going to affect those summer plans that I don't know what you just said because I don't know that word? And then when they're talking about it some more, you get more information so then you can make that appropriate response.
Another thing you can do is to change the topic entirely. And you might have noticed that some Americans do this occasionally. It's not appropriate to do this all the time. Sometimes things get a little bit more heated than they should, or it's obviously more of an emotional topic, or somebody speaks really fast about a certain thing because they're very passionate about it, and you don't really know what to do or how to handle that. You could definitely change the topic in that way. It's kind of like diffusing the situation a little bit, and Americans will do this to each other too at times. Now, if you do this all the time with the same person, it can be really harmful to the relationship. You don't want to do it all the time. But just give it a few minutes. You can be like, oh, I was thinking about your son the other day. How is he doing?
Yeah, and like she said, you got to use some discernment here because there are some conversations where they are going to try to figure out an answer to this question. Are we going to build here? Will you marry me or not? You can't just like go around that question and just bring up a whole different conversation.
Yes.
But there are other conversations, especially more like small talk conversations, that it doesn't really matter. Americans and English speakers will be very, very forgiving if you just completely switch the topic to a different one.
Yeah, if you feel a little uncomfortable about your ability to understand when exactly you can do that, you could also say, I really don't understand how to respond, so can we switch to another topic? I don't really know how to talk about that, or I'm not really sure how to communicate about this topic. And that's totally fine usually.
Or I'm just not comfortable with it.
Yeah, and that's usually totally fine with an American.
The third one is if they're speaking and you don't quite understand, you can ask them to reword what they just said.
Yes. This is very nifty if somebody's using a bunch of words or phrases or idioms that you don't really understand what they're saying, or there's too many jumps. The keywords are too far apart and you're not quite sure how they connect. Something that you can do is to just say, hey, could you say that again in a little bit of a different way so that I can understand a little easier? I don't really get all the words that you're saying. You could even say, I don't really get all the words that you're using or the phrases that you're using. So I'd be really grateful. I'd really appreciate it if you would say it again.
Yeah, or you can also ask them how they would reword what you just said. Like if they give you kind of like a weird look, like you say something but they don't really understand it, then you could say, hey, how would you say what I just said? Because obviously I'm not saying it in a very natural way, which is really cool because if your friend is willing, it turns the whole conversation to kind of like a mini ESL lesson of how do you say what I just said in a more natural way.
Right. And to be clear, it is also okay to say, I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure how to say this, or I'm not quite sure what you said. Can you please reword that? Totally fine to do that. It is acceptable to do that. Just don't do it so much in the same conversation. You don't have to say, I'm sorry, every single time.
Number 4 is to own up to the mistake or take responsibility.
Call yourself out.
Yes. I actually love doing this. Even when I was speaking in Chinese, I would make a mistake. I know I would make a mistake. And I would say out loud, how I just made this mistake. Help me out here. How do you say this word? How do you say this sentence in a more natural way? And when I do that, the other person, they kind of take it upon themselves to kind of help that person out. If the pace of the conversation is moving super fast, they can't really do that very well. But if it's just a one-on-one conversation, you're having a chat, that's a really good opportunity for them to say, yes, I can do that. I can show you how to say that in a more natural way.
Yes, up until this point, some of you guys are thinking, like, this is a personality thing. Of course, Josh and Amber would be okay saying that. I would like to share with you and encourage you real quick, for all of you introverts out there, I'm an introvert and I'm a little bit of near perfectionist. Not quite full perfectionist, but near perfectionist. But so for me, I want to get it right. And if I could just come out and just be perfect in my language, that'd be great. Sometimes for me to call out, I know what I'm saying is wrong, or I know I just made a mistake because I see it on your face. Please let me know how I could do this better. And it's always worked out really well. After the fact, I'm never upset that I asked somebody to help me out with saying what it is in context correctly, because that's a great way to learn a language. It's a great way to sink in memory hooks in a way that you're going to remember it and be able to use it again soon.
The 5th and final one for today is move on.
Just keep going.
Sometimes we get so focused on our own mistakes. We are our own biggest critics. And we just say, man, I messed that up. I made that mistake. I did it again. And we just kind of spiral downwards in this like, man, my English is so bad. Or man, my Chinese is so bad.
Yes. It's a really bad mind state to be in for language learning and being able to just communicate cross-culturally. You've got to be able to just move on. But honestly, a lot of you already know that the context determines meaning. So for many of you, maybe you don't know every little word, you don't catch every the or is in a sentence, but you know by the more words being said, the more that we understand. It's the same thing for Americans when we're talking to English language learners. The more that we say, the more keywords we have to understand exactly what's being said. So if you are low intermediate, you're trying to string your words together to communicate something, just keep going. Just keep going. You are going to do yourself a greater favor by continuing to go rather than stopping and focusing and obsessing over which verb tense to use, over which adjective to use in what place in the sentence. Just keep going, get it out, and communicate. The point is to communicate, not to have perfect grammar.
As English teachers, one of the biggest things that we saw, especially with our beginners and intermediates, is that they just do not talk enough. There were some personalities there that would talk even though they have no idea what they're saying. But by and large, the biggest problem that we saw was that people would start speaking a sentence, they'd make a mistake, and then they'd either freeze up, I don't know what I just did, or they would just stop and apologize and say, I just can't.
Yes, and you don't want to be in that mind state. You're a brilliant human being, and you have things to say and to communicate. Do it. Yeah. Just do the thing.
And you would be surprised at how gracious English speakers can be, especially your friends can be. I made so many mistakes in Chinese, but I had very few people that would look at me and just be like, that was wrong. The worst ones were kids. I will say they're very honest about the mistakes you make.
Brutally honest.
Brutally honest. But your friends, they're going to take it in stride and they're going to try to support you and encourage you because they know how difficult it can be.
Yes, you've got this.
So long story short, awkward moments are guaranteed. It will happen in a language learning journey. It's going to happen to you today if you're going to speak English. But the goal is not just to freeze up or say I'm sorry 100 times in a conversation.
Or even to be perfect.
It's to push through to fluency, to continue to grow in your English, and to figure out other ways to navigate those situations.
Learn from your mistakes. If you would like more practice with American small talk, Josh actually built a course for Fluency Fast Track.
We have like daily challenges where we're going through it with other people, speaking challenges, people exactly like you that are trying and striving for English fluency. and you get graded feedback. It's a really good community there. So if you are interested in that, you can check the link below, and we would love to see you there.
All right, guys, that's it for this one. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye. I am the master of awkward.
One of the questions you could ask is like, I'm sorry, what is it?